You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 380 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer. I will be your host, and I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin, and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's warm, Jeremy. It's very warm.
It's warm. It's windy. The wind was blowing out all weekend at Wrigley Field. We've got a lot of Cubs news and games to talk about. We took last week off, Father's Day week. I was on vacation. We took a week off of the podcast, and a lot of stuff to get into. Pat, you did an awesome job in my absence the week before.
Sorry to Wally Pip you like that, Jeremy, but
tremendous stuff, and glad to be back in studio here and to help us recap the weeks that were and preview the week that will be. Longtime friend of the show. You know him from his work at CHGO and all of his fabulous writing. And, of course, his many appearances on this podcast, Jared Wyllys. Thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Well, as always, thanks for having me.
We've got a lot to get through. Last time we recorded, the Cubs, they lost 2 of 3 to Philadelphia, and they won 3 of 4 against Pittsburgh. As we dive into the longest homestand of the season for the Cubs, Pat, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on the Philadelphia and Pittsburgh series?
well, if you recall from our last podcast, the 2 series went exactly the way I foretold it. Not because I cheated and I bought a time machine and went in the future to watch it, but because it's so predictable because it's baseball. But look, the Cubs could have won 2 out of 3 against Philly. They end up losing 2 out of 3, whatever. They're on the road. They had already taken 2 out of 3 from Washington on that trip, so all's good. And they came home against Pittsburgh, and I believe I stated that I thought it was important that they win 3 out of 4 in that Pittsburgh series. And that seems like an easy task, given how bad Pittsburgh is, but we knew Paul Skeens was going to be pitching in that series, so that's, a level of difficulty. And frankly, when you looked at it, and we kind of referenced this during the podcast, Pittsburgh's got a couple decent pitchers. They're sneaky good in their starting pitching. Now, everything else is bad, and their center fielder seems, well, I think complacent would be putting it kindly, in O'Neal Cruz, based on his, I don't know if you saw this week. It wasn't the Cubs series, but he had a ball go by him in the outfield. He just stood there and never looked back and just let it roll to the wall. And runs kept scoring, and it was pretty bad. So the Cubs did end up losing the Skeens game. Sadly, they had a chance to win that game actually, and then they blew it anyway. But they took care of business. They won the other 3. The only somewhat alarming part about that was that it was okay. I felt like for the Cubs to play poorly offensively against the Phillies in a couple games, against some tough pitchers. It's Washington in a game, but they did not hit the ball well against Pittsburgh. They, despite the good starting staff Pittsburgh has, Cubs didn't exactly get to the bullpen that much either. It was really it felt very Colorado-ish in the sense that they were winning these games, but it was a real hard slow. And the bullpen of the Cubs pitched great all series, and the starters are pretty good. So the Cubs were able to win 3 out of 4 and really put themselves in a great position going 4-3 that week to come into the rest of this homestand this week and do some damage had they chosen to do so.
Yeah, Jared, it would have been a different tone if the Cubs had lost some of those close games. These were 1-run games here, the 3-2 win, the 2-1 win, and the 3-2 win again on the Sunday. Any of those games, if you're talking even a split with the Pirates, I think it would have been a disappointing start to this homestand. But they were able to do it, even though the bats were quiet. We did see them come around late with the wind blowing out, but what were some of your thoughts on the offensive performance in Pittsburgh against Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I think that also stood out to me as something that is like beginning to raise an eyebrow just in the level of production that we've seen from them and lately, and against teams where you do expect them to score a little more easily. And then especially when you're at home, and you're in a part of the season now where the weather is warming up and you're getting a little bit more of that like hitter friendly environment at Wrigley. And other than, they got some help from the wind, in particular on Saturday. But then again, it's so is everybody. So, where's the offense when that's not happening? And I think they didn't score as much as they could have, even with that going on. So that is something that, like, I'm looking at where I think we talked about it earlier in the season, where it was just sort of bound to happen to some extent because some of these guys just weren't going to keep hitting the way that they were at the very beginning of the season. And so some of it's probably the normal regression that's bound to happen. But at the same time, you do start to look at an extended stretch like this, and you have to start to ask yourself, is this more like what their offense is? And if so, then what needs to be done about that going forward in order to keep this team competing at anywhere near the level that they have been?
The big series of the week as the homestand rolled on was the Brewers coming in for 3 games. One of the games got rained out, the Wednesday game. A much-needed day off for the Cubs here. So a little bonus for having the rain out is getting that day off, especially looking at the week ahead. We'll get there later on in the show. But the Tuesday game, the 17th against the Brewers, Cubs win 5-3. Ben Brown pitches that game, and he got through the first inning without giving up any runs, which is always notable for a Ben Brown start. The wind was blowing out, and Isaac Collins with the 2-run home run. It was the Cubs having Shaw with a double to the gap, scoring Nico Horner, getting that going, and Suzuki, of course, with the 3-run home run, giving the Cubs the lead. We had Cabrera come in and give up another run, and we'll talk about the bullpen in as we discuss the next couple of games here. But having that first big victory, including a PCA home run that went like 450 some feet and hit off the scoreboard and right. Just an absolutely great performance by the Cubs against the Milwaukee. Pat, your thoughts on the big PCA home run and Suzuki's home runs here?
Well, in particular, Suzuki's home run, I think, was the key to the game. That was a 3-run home run that kind of put the game away. And Suzuki's really kind of, I don't know, should I say quietly? Somewhat quietly, has been getting some, not just big hits, but like 3-run, like when he hits home runs, he's hit some really meaningful home runs, 3-run home runs, there's a reason why he's third or fourth in the MLB in RBIs right now, because pace for like 130 some or whatever, because he's come through in the clutch quite a bit. So that was big, and the PCA was sort of icing on the cake, as PCA is prone to do, which is great. And I just thought it was a really good momentum starter for a series to get off with that win. And then, as you pointed out, they had the rain out the next day. And note that they actually called the rain out early, like hours before the game. Now, did the players have to actually come to the stadium, or did they already know ahead of time? They probably came to the stadium, but I have a feeling that they kind of knew without even having to do any warm-ups or anything like that. With just being in the clubhouse, they knew that game was as they say now, what did they say? The game was going to get banged, right?
Banged.
So as a result, they didn't have to go through the laborious process that they sometimes do of going out, warming up, getting ready, having the starting pitcher warm up, and getting everybody loose, and maybe even playing an inning or two, and then having it rained out and sitting there for a 3-hour rain delay before they call the game. Under the circumstances of this 26 games and 27 days or whatever it is, it was nice that was kind of as clean of a rain out as you're going to get. So it really was like having sort of a day off, almost like a scrimmage. Like, you're not even a scrimmage, but you just kind of come in for a team meeting and then you go home, right? So That was really nice, I thought, for the team. They probably could have really used it at that point. And
Except
hopefully
Jared had to come in too.
Well, I know, poor Jared. But then, we'll see if how that plays out, next week, that extra rest. But I was very pleased with the way things started in that series, those the first game and then the non-game, which also, by the way, with Peralta and that new the young pitcher, the fast guy, what's his name? The Brewers have.
Oh, Mizorowski.
Yeah, that's who they were going to be facing the next two games. So that meant that they didn't have to face Mizorowski, which was fine by me.
Well, they did. So I can't confirm on Wednesday that there were players there, because typically for like a 7:05 first pitch, the locker room's going to open somewhere around 3:15 or 3:30, and so I was there. There were players there. But I think by 5 o'clock, it was right around 5 o'clock when they came out and told us that the game was not going to be played that night. So that, there was a full 2 hours before. And so one of the things that we saw was Jamison Taillon, who was supposed to start Wednesday night, then was able to start the next day. Now, it didn't work out so well on Thursday because he gave up, several home runs. But I think, to your point, Pat, like he didn't have to go through the process of getting all warmed up and getting prepped and then finding out, which did allow them to use him on Thursday. But again, you wish things had turned out differently that day. But yeah, they were there, but there was a little bit of like, we were all kind of there sort of knowing what was going to happen. So it wasn't a huge surprise, because usually what they'll do is we're in the locker room for a while and then they move us into like that media room, which is where like Craig Counsell will come out and he does his pre and post game stuff with us. So we were all sitting in there, and we were sitting there for a long time on Wednesday. And the longer we sat there, we put the pieces of the puzzle together and figured out like they're going to come in and tell us the game's canceled. It's just a matter of they're trying to figure out, when do we play a doubleheader to make up this one and all that kind of stuff. So, which is then what ended up happening. And I was at the Thursday game, but not in a professional capacity. I was actually out in the right field bleachers with some friends. So hanging out there for that one. So yeah, it was a different experience for me that day.
I was also in attendance at the Thursday, June 19th game as well. I was in the W Club, and I got to see a friend of the show, James Naveau. That was his birthday, so I was able to buy him a Chicago handshake at Nace Lounge before the game, and
nice.
And I will be on his podcast this week as a guest of the same name. So if you check that out, friend of the show, James Naveau there. But I was also in attendance for this game, and you mentioned Taillon gave up a few home runs. The Cubs did get to Peralta, but I see Cabrera come out here again. He can't do anything in the fifth inning.
In fact, before he gave up the 3-run homer, you texted me that he was bad. I
texted you Cabrera is bad, and I did not want to see him out there. Yeah. And then he proceeded to be bad, as predicted.
I think he's...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Cabrera is really... He came in as a placeholder until they were... we're sort of waiting for Porter Hodge to return. And then I think they ended up having to cut Cabrera loose a little sooner than they had hoped to or planned to, because I think Hodge is close to returning. But this was kind of what everybody expected. He had a few nice outings, put together a few nice innings, but the reality of Genesis Cabrera as a pitcher, reared its ugly head pretty quickly.
But the thing about this Cubs team in this season is, even though they're down 8-3, this team can come back. And just last year, if the team was down 8-3, the game's over. The team was not coming back. Now, they still lost 8-7 in this game, but it was an exciting game, and they had a chance, and they came back against a good team in Milwaukee. So this is something that we can be excited about here, is how this Cubs offense, when it's going, they have a chance to be in every game, and that was the thing here. You got to see this type of game where the Cubs were able to they fell just short, and the bullpen struggles, I think, continue to be a story. When Pat, when you've got, you need Flexen and Pomerantz to carry your bullpen. Your bullpen's in bad shape.
Yeah, and I would actually go so far as to say I think the Cubs, you can't say they blew the game because they were down the whole time, but I really thought they were going to come back in that game when they had the bases loaded. I mean, it looked to me, it seemed like, oh yeah, this is going to happen. Was that the one? They all kind of run together. Was that the one where Suzuki was not called out on strikes on what could have been strike 3, and then on the next pitch he hits it a double play? So it's like the one time we get a ball strike break, it ends up costing us an extra out. So
the double play from Suzuki to end it. It was
we had actually we ducked out early and went over to Murphy's, and then when they started to rally, I was kind of joking with my friends, like, surely they'll let us back in so we can see the end of it, because that's exactly how it works. But yeah, so we were watching the last couple innings at Murphy's and worried that I had made a mistake by leaving early, but yeah, it was the Suzuki double play that caught that rally short.
So before we get into the Seattle series, let's talk a minute about the big news, which was this is the return of Sammy Sosa for the first time in 20 years, coming back to Wrigley Field. We remembered he was announced at Cubs convention that he would be going into the Cubs Hall of Fame. Whatever penance had to be paid to the Ricketts family has been paid, and he's now welcomed back. And here he was. There was all kinds of festivities and welcoming back Sammy Sosa to the ballpark. Jared, you were in attendance. Tell us a little bit about being there for some of these festivities and his return to Wrigley Field.
Well, what I found most interesting about it is they decided to treat it the same way that they do anytime any other former player is in attendance. Because we've all seen where they'll show that Legends of the Game montage on the left field video board, and then it'll cut to Ben Zobrist or Billy Williams or whoever it is that's there in one of the suites. Because I went into the day thinking they would have Sosa like throw out a first pitch or do something like that, where it would be a much more deliberate, like we're showing that he's here, we're kind of welcoming him back. But they didn't go that direction. There was no acknowledgement that he was there until that montage played. They showed him on the screen. I mean, and predictably, like, the crowd just went nuts for him. And at one point a little bit later, he was in the marquee booth, I think the 4th inning, and then he went into one of the other, I think the Spanish language radio booth. And so some of the fans could see him in the window there. And so they started chanting, Sammy, Sammy. So there were a few things like that. And then they did, like, they brought Sammy back into, it was actually like the press dining room. And they set up like a little interview spot there. And so we spoke to him, I think it was 4th or 5th inning. He talked to us for a little while. But the whole attitude that the team seemed to have was very much like, we're just going to treat this the same way that we would any other returning player, which I think is interesting because, yes, technically he's just a Cubs alum that's coming back, but you can't just pretend as though everything that's happened with Sammy, like, as if it's not there, and just like, hey, no big deal, Sammy's back. And even in the pregame, Paul Sullivan asked the question, like, why is he here today, or why today? And he got sort of like a dismissive kind of a response to that question, which again I thought was interesting because, like, it's been 21 years. This is a pretty big deal, and not that you want to treat Sammy like he should overshadow other former players when they come back, but it is Sammy Sosa, and it's been 21 years. What he meant to the organization during his playing career, and then to have him gone from the team for as long as he was, and then finally make his return on kind of a random Friday against the Mariners. That part of it all felt a little odd. But yeah, that was the general vibe there was just like, oh yeah, Sammy Sosa's here. And then that was it. So I thought it surprised me a little.
I didn't find it interesting. I thought it was ridiculous, is what I thought it was. Anybody between the age of 40 and, I don't know, 65 grew up in some way or another as a young adult or as a child with Sammy Sosa as like the preeminent figure in Cubs baseball. I mean, it's not like Bobby Howry showed up or something, or Kevin Tapani or somebody. I mean, look, no offense to any of these guys, but it's not Mike Remlinger. This is Sammy Sosa, for God's sake. This is, and not only should he not be treated the same way that other former Cubs who come back are treated, he should be treated like royal. I mean, he's basically, look, Ernie Banks has passed away. You've got Billy Williams and Fergie Jenkins still kind of coming out occasionally. You got Brian Sandberg. If Mark Grace or Andre Dawson were around, that's great. And they all these guys have been around off and on. Kerry Wood, they show up. The rest of the Cub greats are still active players. Chris Bryant, you can whatever quibble with, but more or less active players. But among the retired players, Sammy Sosa is like he's on the Mount Rushmore of living ex-Cub players. Like what are they doing here? Like this is like, of course he should be thrown out the first pitch. It almost seems like too cute by habit, playing too cool for school. Like, oh well, we're gonna let him back, and maybe down the road we'll let him throw out a first pitch. It's like, well, come on, like. This guy, he didn't make the money for the Ricketts. I know he made it for the Tribune Company, but he helped propel the Cubs into modernity with his, with the attendance and the money. When Sammy Sosa was first starting to hit home runs for the Cubs, it cost $14 to sit in the bleachers. So how much was the game you guys were at? $100, right? And it's not just inflation. Like that's just in like 27 years. But it's more than that. It really is that he transformed the experience at Wrigley Field in ways that frankly no other player has. Full stop, 100% ever, right? No Cub player has ever done what he did in terms of on a daily basis getting fans to come to games. So I don't know. I think he deserved a little bit more than that.
And I think, in my opinion, he's at some point they're going to have to ask the question of like where they're going to put the Sammy Sosa statue because he's
that empty spot they got there. How about that?
Right.
That's a good start for starters. They got a place right for him, ready to go.
Yeah. So that's what yeah, absolutely. I thought he's at that level with this organization. So yeah, to have him come back for the first time in 21 years and then be so casual about it was odd. Yeah, for sure.
The fact that Mark McGwire and Manny Ramirez are allowed to hang out with the Cubs and show up at spring training and be coaches or instructors or whatever, it's like, what are we doing? Like, come on, guys.
And among the, you mentioned the retired players, and Ben Zobrist is the guy who at least this season has been there the most often. It's kind of become it's not a joke against Ben Zobrist, but like in the press box, we kind of laugh every time we see the Ben Zobrist montage play, and then there he is, because it's like the guy's here 3 times a week. But
if I were Ben Zobrist, I'd be there 5 times a week. I don't know why he's only there 3 times. I think it'd be great.
Yeah,
it's a fun thing to do.
Be there all the time.
Yeah,
and you have somebody like that who, yes, he means a lot to the organization because of what he was a part of. But you compare the number of years that he played for the Cubs, and just the total impact on the organization. Like Pat, you're absolutely right. Like Sammy Sosa transformed the Cubs in the 90s, and so much of like the paradigm shift that I think culminated in 2016 when they won a World Series. You were seeing like the groundwork for that being laid when Sammy Sosa was playing there decades before that. And so it does feel a little bit like you've once again, you had a chance to really like acknowledge this guy in the way that he deserves to be, and they just didn't do it.
And look, I'll be the first to say, like, if Sammy Sosa was coming many times this season, he doesn't have to throw out the first pitch or sing the 7th inning stretch every game. I mean, God knows Kerry Wood. It's funny. Kerry Wood is there so often. I remember one game when I I think it was the Friday. You know how in September they have these Friday home games, and then like there's like a Notre Dame game the next day. So you'll have all the USC fans. Where he was Texas. Notre Dame was playing Texas the next day, and he is a Texas guy. All his buddies from University of Texas were there. They're sitting next to us in our seats, Jeremy. There's like 8 of them, and they're just sitting there drinking beers. Like he wasn't in any way doing any Cubs-related activities. He was just hanging out with his buddies at the game, getting some good seats and having fun. And that's fine when it's your 48th time back to Wrigley since your retirement. But I feel like for your first time back, like and especially when it's so long overdue, like in Sosa's case, so it feels. Especially like in that situation, you should just rip off the Band-Aid and get it all over get it out of the way rather than try to do it piecemeal or drip.
I am glad for the fans that he's back. They got to see him. They got to talk about him. We got to remember Sammy Sosa memories. We got to do something like that. That's great because a lot of times these grudges and rivalries and whatever go on too late and you have to wait till someone's no longer with us to
it's like Ron Santo in the Hall of Fame, for God's sake.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's exactly the first thing that comes to mind. And it's like, well, at least this gives a chance for fans to give Sammy Sosa his flowers now while he's here. And hopefully that will continue whenever they do whatever they do for their Hall of Fame induction. Hopefully they are saving a lot of that stuff for that because really they should.
Yeah. Well, they are... Yeah, there is going to be like he's going to have his own day that weekend. It's the weekend of like September 5th, 6th, and 7th, and they said that Derek Lee, one of the days the focus will be on Lee, and the other day the focus will be on Sosa. So maybe they're kind of waiting until that whole thing because there is going to be this big ceremony. But yeah, for his first day back in 21 years, I really thought like at the very least get the guy on the field.
Yeah.
And you know what, especially the sad part is Sosa desperately wants to he's not being too cool for school. He desperately would love to be back on the field. He would love nothing more than to run out into the right field bleachers with a Cubs flag or whatever and have all the fans, like go crazy or whatever. I mean, that he actually embodies like the Cubs spirit in a way that the Cubs should, I think, embrace.
Yeah, it's the Cubs actually played a game that Friday as well against Seattle, and
without Sammy there to lead them on,
no,
it was a lost cause, wasn't it?
It was. We mentioned at the top of the show the wind blowing out aggressively, and that was the story of this series. The Cubs dropping the first game to the Brewers. They gave up the Mariners. They gave up 7 unanswered runs. Quick fashion corner on these Seattle uniforms. That red Nintendo Switch patch looks ridiculous on that jersey. At least the Cubs Motorola patches are the same color as the jersey. That thing was just so obnoxious.
It sticks out so bad. Yeah, I hate it. And I saw people on Twitter commenting about it. So it was even like on TV, it was catching people's eye. But yeah, from where I was sitting in the press box, it was like it really stood out. It clashed with the rest of the uniform. Don't like it. I normally I like the Mariners uniform. To me, it's one of the more like the color scheme, everything. Mm-hmm. It's one that I like. So yeah, fix that patch, guys.
I think Bozo the Clown got a better deal on that, in terms of uniforms. Than what they're doing now with the patch. As far as the games, though, concerned, Jeremy, I got to say, because the Cubs were ahead in that game before the 7 unanswered runs, there is you knew this was coming, right? There was going to be a day when all these guys in the bullpen who hadn't given up a run in like 3 months or whatever, or ever, in Pomerantz's case, like 5 years, there's going to be a time when at some point, the Ryan Pressey, after getting pounded in that Giants game I was at, he was going to get hit again. I mean, you just can't expect it to be the bullpen to be flawless. And so I know Cabrera again had another bad game, but I almost can't blame either Counsell or the bullpen so much as that it's just, fate catching up with them, frankly. It would have been nice if the Cubs offense, the wind blew out on both in the top and bottom half of the innings. So the Cubs could have actually, maybe tried to score some runs too. And if they had, it would have been like that Arizona game early in the year on that Friday. And then we would all been laughing and joking about, how great the team was after we won the game, like 14-11 or whatever. But they didn't do that. They really the offense just shut down despite the wins. So yeah, it was not a fun game. And it wasn't as bad. I guess, was it the ninth inning when they gave up the 3 runs, when Cabrera gave up the 3 runs? So it was a closer game until then, but still, it was a disappointing start to that series. You would have liked to always jump out and win, especially after you realize you just split with the Brewers with the rain out, and now you're down 2-1 with 2 to go. You don't have a losing week. That's not fun for podcasts.
But before Friday's game, as I was sitting and eating lunch with a couple of the other guys, and we were talking about the number of arms in the bullpen that have gone such a long stretch without giving up runs. And we all kind of unanimously agreed, like, this is going to end soon. Because there's no way, like, exactly, to your point, Pat, like, at some point the Presleys and Pomerantz and Flexen and some of these guys, like, it's going to happen. And so then sure enough, as that, what we talked about at lunchtime, like, then a few hours later during the game, we're seeing it unfold in front of us. We all kind of laughed about it, but it is a little bit of like, when your bullpen is built on so many of these guys that I don't know if reclamation project is a fair way of putting it, but when you do have guys like a Pomerantz or like a Flexen who are you're getting such a great performance from, you have to know, like, there's going to come a point where that's going to regression's going to happen there, and so they're going to have some of these bad outings.
It's late June. We were either going to get regression or we were going to have like 5 Cub relief pitchers on the All-Star team, one or the other. But
right,
I mean,
right, like, and in many ways, it felt like they were way overdue for, like, you got to get roughed up a little, because that's just the nature of this game. And so I think what I'll be curious to see is, as that does start to happen, when the Cubs go forward and we get a little closer to the trade deadline, what sort of moves they might make to solidify some of that, so that you're not going into the back half of the season or even the playoffs and still sending Chris Flexen out there and hoping that he's going to give you another scoreless inning.
You kind of feel like they were like a week away from getting some guys healthy again too in the bullpen, and maybe bridge that gap. And these guys, try as they may, starters and bullpen, frankly, just seem to be sputtering. They just couldn't keep it up for a full, multiple months before reality.
One of those guys is Pearson, and we saw what that looked like today.
Well, get to that, I suppose. Yeah. Taking over for Cabrera.
Yeah, so the bullpen is a concern here, and this series turned out to be the Cal Raleigh series. That was worse than expected. I knew he would. You figured he'd get his home run, but didn't think it was going to be this bad. Holy cow!
It was almost the Ian Happ series, I might add. Speaking of a guy who's on a little bit of a run here, he had 3 more homers this weekend, and he's been. At one point, I thought he might pass Kyle Tucker at the rate he was going, but then Tucker hit a couple too. But yeah, to your point, Cal Raleigh is a great hitting catcher. I had him for many years on my fantasy team, waiting for this big breakout season. I did not have him this year, but you always knew he was capable of hitting 25 plus homers. He might hit 218 in the process, but you knew he could hit for power. But my God, how many home runs did he have this weekend? Like 4 or 5?
4. He had 4 home runs in this series alone.
He's on pace for like 65 homers. Speaking of Sammy Sosa, and he's a catcher.
He has more home runs than any catcher before the All-Star break. He passed Johnny Bench this
What
year.
is the all-time record for home runs by a catcher? It's got to be like 40-something, right? Low 40s, probably.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I have no idea. But he's on pace to smash whatever it is, I would have to think, because even with some slowdown, he's still 50 home runs is not unreasonable.
No. Now, I will say it was also nice to see the Cubs catchers continue to hit home runs, and they're now they have 17 homers as a group, as a unit. So they're on pace for over 35 homers. The last time the Cubs did that was like when Rick Wilkins was a catcher, I think.
48 home runs by Salvador Perez in 2021.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. He had that one weird year Was he playing first base or DH part of the time? I don't remember.
Yeah, he hit 48, and that surpassed Johnny Bench's 45 in 1970.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think Raleigh, even if he does cool off a little, I think 48's attainable. I mean, if he plays another week at Wrigley, he could get 48.
Yeah. We talked, by the way, last year about him as a potential trade candidate for the Cubs. Remember that? The question was, what would the problem was like, why would they give us Cal Raleigh? And I was like, well, what if we took Luis Castillo's contract off their hands too and gave him some prospects in return? And oh well.
You mentioned Ian Happ also hitting home runs on the Saturday game. Ian Happ with another leadoff home run. He had 3 straight games with a home run at that point, and then 2 in that Saturday game alone. You mentioned last time we podcasted, Pat, that Ian Happ needed a hot streak to get back to what his normal stat line was.
I was confident he would do it. And sure enough, that's the thing about Ian Happ. No matter how hot he starts off or how cold he starts off, he always ends up in the same place at the end of the year. It's really amazing how consistent he's been. And, you got to say there's something to that. I mean, it's not super exciting to know what somebody's going to do, but if you're a manager or if you're a general manager, team president, boy, having a guy who you kind of know what they're going to do, that's a great asset to have because you don't have to account for as much kind of ups and downs when you're trying to figure out what you need to do to build a team. And he's like the perfect example of a steady Eddie or steady Ian.
And you've still got Ian Happ for one more year after this. So it's
Yes.
it's good to see him in the leadoff spot, being able to get to the numbers that he needs to be at to be Ian Happ here. So he had a big week. PCA keeps hitting home runs, Jared. What's the talking to the team and everything? How is this series? What's been the feedback for both Ian Happ's performance and the continued success of PCA?
Well, Happ, I think it's almost reached the point where it's easy to take for granted what he does, and so much so that I think there's even a portion of the fan base that undervalues Ian Happ, and many people who seem intent on convincing themselves that he's actually bad at baseball, which just perplexes me.
Yeah.
But you don't have to look very hard in certain pockets of the internet to find these people that just don't seem to. I don't know why they think that, but it is what it is. But yeah, Happ is, and I think that's a big part of like why he's your leadoff guy. He's a switch hitter. He gives you a lot of quality at bats, but I think a lot of that is just that steadiness that you really do know what he's going to produce for you. And so starting every game with him at the top of the order is something that you can feel really good about. As for PCA, I mean, he is. I've not heard Craig Counsell talk about any player the way that I hear Craig Counsell talk about PCA. And Counsell, like, as we know, is a pretty even keel, level-headed guy. He's not, this big personality sort of person. So much so that, last year people were wondering whether or not, like, does Craig Counsell actually care? It's some of that kind of stuff. But he really has some of the most glowing praise for PCAs I've heard for anybody. I mean, Friday when we were there, we were talking about PCA, but also kind of as a part of the whole Sammy Sosa conversation. And Craig Counsell said, like, PCA has reached that level of, like, he's appointment watching. You've got to watch to see what PCA is going to do, whether it's at the plate or what he's going to do in the field, even what he's going to do on the base pass. And so talk about just an incredible season that he's having so far, to the point that I think you'd have to, like, even objectively kind of step back and say, without Pico Armstrong having the kind of year that he is this year, where would the Cubs be? I mean, you could break down the actual WAR value that PCA has the nuts and bolts of that. Yes,
league leading, by the way.
Right. Yeah, and that number is no joke, but I think what it does in terms of like galvanizing the rest of the team, there is also something to that when you have someone who does what he does, but also plays with the like energy that he does. I think it changes the tenor of a clubhouse and a team. And so PCA's value to the Cubs this year has been tremendous, at risk of like hyperbole, but I think it's really like you have to look at him and say a lot of why they are 15 games above 500 is because of that guy.
Well, I think I saw a stat that PCA is either the fourth or fifth player in history, 23 and under, to have a 2020 before the All-Star break. And he's going to have 25-25 most likely, right, before the All-Star break. He might be the only player to ever do that. Those are some pretty haughty numbers. And you look at for example, his WAR currently, he's on pace to outpace by an entire run Derek Lee's fantastic, like ridiculous MVP season. I mean, he's pushing Sammy Sosa's all-time best season for WAR as a not child, but as a very young man who's still learning the game in his first full season of play. So yeah, I think the sky's the limit. And if he doesn't get caught up on the whole, like not being able to walk and getting too anxious at the plate, I think that's the only, but for that, if he can avoid that, I don't see any other obstacles, because the speed and the defense are almost like automatics. And then the power seems to be legit. So he's got the tools.
And even if he is sort of like expanding his zone a little bit when he is at the plate, like we're seeing this year, the way that he's hitting pitches out of the ballpark that are down by his ankles or, up close to his eyes, even some of those pitches that he can clearly get some power on, like Vlad Guerrero Sr. type of stuff.
I was just about to say, that's a Vlad Guerrero move right there.
Yeah. So like, it's true that like he's got high strikeout, low walk potential, but at the same time, if he's able to get to pitches that are that far out of the zone and do real damage with them, you kind of want to tell the guy, like, stay aggressive. Don't swing out of your shoes necessarily, but like this aggressiveness is working for you, and you're doing damage with it. So keep that up. But it does come with a little bit of the risk of he could have some cold stretches as the season goes on where the strikeouts start to rack up. But based on how things are going now, I'm kind of okay with that.
And the series closed out with a loss on the Sunday. Colin Ray pitching for the Cubs and Logan Gilbert for Seattle. It's a tough pitcher in Logan Gilbert. The Cubs offensively, Suzuki with a couple of home runs. You got Tucker and McGuire each with a home run. But the Colin Ray conversation flows right into our look at the starting rotation. And with the returning Shota Imanaga to the rotation, what do you think, Jared? How do you think the Cubs handle this? Is Colin Ray the guy to move out? Is Ben Brown the guy that moves out? What do you think Craig Counsell and the team is going to do here with the returning Shota Imanaga?
I think the move that you make is Colin Ray moves into your bullpen, because then he can be there as your long relief pitcher and make a spot start when needed. That's a role that he's done before in his career, so you know that he can handle that. And you keep Ben Brown in that rotation for now, and perhaps even you use the opener with Ben Brown, as we've seen a couple of times now. But yeah, I think Colin Ray has to be your guy that makes that shift into the bullpen.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ray has to go in the bullpen, and honestly, I look forward to the day when the Cubs get another starting pitcher such that Brown can also pitch out of the bullpen, and they can actually have, knock on wood, somebody plus Imanaga plus Boyd plus Teon plus Horton, in the rotation. Because I don't I worry that the Cubs are just, look, Justin Steele would have been that guy, right? So it's not like it's just the way it goes, but they need that Justin Steele pitcher back. Is what
so you're saying they need to go out and get a top of the rotation guy.
They need to get somebody who could start a playoff game who's better than Jameson Teon. How about that? So if you say that Imanaga can start a playoff game, and I personally believe a healthy Matt Boyd can also start a playoff game, emphasis on healthy, and emphasis on both of those guys pitching a whole season, which, is a lot to ask for, although Imanaga had a nice gap there, so he's got some extra rest. But yeah, they need another guy because Teon cannot be your number 3 starter in a playoff series, I don't think. If for a successful team, not the way these things work, where you have to go through multiple rounds like this. And maybe by the end of the year that would be Horton. But again, you get in the problem with Horton where he's going to pitch more innings than he's ever pitched. So not only do the Cubs have the issue of having a lot of guys who are either going to really stretch their all-time innings limits or are sort of historically injury prone. You almost can't expect all these guys to be 100% in October. So yeah, you absolutely need somebody else, I think.
So looking at where the Cubs are, still in first place, even after a week like this, we've talked about problems in the bullpen, needing to add something there to solidify the bullpen.
It might just be guys who are in the rotation currently or on the injured list, frankly. I mean, for all you know, they might be able to wing this one, which I would not have said a month ago.
Well, and honestly, if you get Porter Hodge back, and he's had his own moments of looking a little wobbly, but you get Porter Hodge back in that bullpen, Imanaga comes back, and that pushes Colin Ray into the bullpen. Even those two things by themselves change the look of that bullpen really, really significantly.
Let's not forget Eli Morgan too, who was supposed to be a more meaningful piece at the beginning there.
And the news that we got on him, I think that was Friday, was he's still a little ways away. But there is, this could be a second half return situation for him. And so that also would change this bullpen really significantly. So even without like a trade per se, your bullpen is going to change a lot just in the next week. But I think if you add on top of that, making your trade about getting one of those better starting pitchers out there so that Ben Brown perhaps can shift into your bullpen, then now you've really like this bullpen that's kind of been held together on guys kind of outperforming expectations. You're not going to be in that situation anymore. So I think we'd be surprised at how quickly the bullpen can look a lot different.
Much rather have Brown in the 7th or 8th inning than a Cabrera or a Pearson. How about that? I mean,
yes,
it just
absolutely.
Everything just kind of spirals, upward with that.
Right. If you're talking, maybe Brown, Hodge, Palencia or something like that, or Presley when he's in some of his better stretches, you've got him in that mix as well. That's a back end of the bullpen group that I think you can feel really good about.
And don't forget Drew Pomerantz. Yay.
Yeah, because I think the other part of the trade conversation is going to be how you handle third base, which has been a problem offensively for a lot of the season here. And we've seen everybody, all the options that the Cubs have, we've seen them all. And while Matt Shaw provides the best defense, offensively, he has struggled of late. And if he doesn't turn that around, I think you have to see the Cubs make a move for third base as well, right, Jared?
Yeah, you absolutely do, because I think, both for Matt Shaw's long-term future, where you can kind of continue this sort of slow down his progression to being a full-time major leaguer. You have that on one hand, but also you're trying to win this year. You have a team that is clearly built to be a division winner and potentially a deep run in the playoffs. And so you need production from third base in order to do that. There's really no reason to believe, based on what he's done so far, that Shaw's going to give you that. So I do think that, along with starting pitcher, a move for at third base. That's something we keep an eye out for.
Would you? Well, first of all, Bregman's available, right? Because the Red Sox are getting rid of everybody. Would you trade Matt Shaw straight up for Cam Smith?
Well, no, only because I want a third baseman.
Okay, and Smith is more of an outfielder, I guess. And
right,
yeah. Offensively, he's certainly got off to a much better start, and is younger.
Based on what he's done on the plate, at the plate, age, all of that, Cam Smith is somebody I'd rather have in the lineup just in general. But yeah, based on defense, he's not going to fill a need that they have right now.
I wonder if we're not going to see Matt Shaw. This is a conversation for next year, probably at second base down the road, as opposed to third base. Again, Nico's on a shorter deal. He's got a year after this, or 2 years with that extension? I forget how many. But
I think he runs through 27, I believe.
Yeah, so that's the year that they're going to skip for the player
work stoppage.
Yeah, work stoppage. So so come 28, I could see Shaw as the Cubs' second baseman, which might actually, for his bat, that might actually be a better fit. See, but
it depends who you go get at third base as well. Or if it's a rental, or if it's someone who has more term, then you do have that flexibility.
And the question is going to become: do the Cubs feel like they're close enough this year that they want to get, sort of like the Luis Salazar type of guy? I mean, I'm going way back now, but the Gary Gaetti or whatever, that third baseman who comes in August and September and helps you win some games because you don't feel like you've got enough of a bat there. And obviously Justin Turner can't play third base. So you just want a veteran you can use, in certain situations.
James Naveau and I were discussing Eugenio Suarez from
Except he's going to hit 60 home runs, so I don't know if he'll be available.
Can you pry him away is the question.
Yeah. So my worst nightmare is that he ends up the Brewers pry him away, and he ends up playing against the Cubs here down the stretch.
If you had told me that he would be like fifth in home runs in the league, I would have told you that he's playing just against the Cubs then, right? Because that would be the only thing that would make sense.
Well, I think the Cubs have to get him just so we can hear Pat Hughes say Eugenio Suarez however many times the rest of the season.
Let's look ahead to the week that will be. For the Cubs, 7 games, no days off coming up here on the road trip. 4 against the St. Louis Cardinals, 3 against the Houston Astros.
Kind of a gut check, isn't it?
Boy, this is we talked about it a couple weeks ago. I was really looking forward to the Cardinals series not being important because the Cardinals weren't going to try this year, and here we are. It's a stupid important series again against St. Louis, playing them for the first time here at the end of June, and then turning around first week of July, July 4th weekend. You've got the Cardinals coming home, coming to Wrigley Field to play on the 4th of July, and a national game on the 6th of July as well. So these 4 games in St. Louis, the pitching probables were still not really available as of the time of this recording for all of the pitching lineup discussion we just had here in the podcast. So hard to make a prediction, but I'll start with you, Pat. 4 at St. Louis, 3 at Houston.
I'll say this, Jeremy. I think this is a stretch this week and then that July week when, despite having the best record in the National League or whatever the Cubs have had, or close to it, for a while here, this is an important stretch because the Cubs could fritter away like this whole lead that they have in the NL Central with a bad 10-day stretch here, or 2-week stretch, sadly, because it is a little bit closer than you'd like, despite their winning. So I think it's kind of important for the Cubs. It'd be very nice for my mental well-being and health if the Cubs could could in fact, actually either gain ground or at least not lose any ground in the next 10 days to 14 days. I feel a lot better about the second half of the season, knowing that the Cubs, have an actual, to go into the All-Star break with a 5.5 or 6 game lead in the division would be very nice, right? But if it's going to be a game or game and a half, and you got a couple teams behind you, it starts to get dicey. So I think realistically, the Cubs, given Imanaga is supposed to make an appearance at some point. I don't know if he'll be in St. Louis or not.
It's supposed to be in the St. Louis series, is what I was.
Yeah. And hopefully he'll be sharp, right? So you don't know about that. But I think if the Cubs could split, I think Cubs more likely than not will split those 4 games. Knock on wood, they don't lose 3 out of 4. I would accept a split. I would have, if you'd asked me this a month ago, I said, "Oh no, let's sweep them." But they're with 3 out of 4.
Sweep,
yeah.
Different.
But now I'd say let's at least let's go 2-2 in this, and then try to beat them at home. And then with Houston afterwards, Houston's one of those teams that's been kind of underperforming this year. They got a couple ex-Cubs on their team now, so that'll be interesting to watch. I always get a bad feeling, going down to Houston to play, and I feel like the Cubs will probably lose 2 out of 3 there. So would it be disappointing for the Cubs to go 3-4 this week? Yeah, because they just had a week where they went 2-3, and the week before that they're 4-3. So they're kind of treading water a little bit here. Or it was 3-3, 4-3, 2-3. But I think 3-4 is probably a realistic finish, given the fact that they're going to be on the road against 2 teams that aren't terrible. I mean, they just played a Mariners team that's a 500 team that kind of blew their doors off a little bit, for what it's worth. So 3-4 would not be catastrophic. 2-5 starts to make me nervous.
Jared, the Astros are 7-3 in their last 10 games. What's your prediction here for the upcoming 7 games?
I have a very similar feeling as Pat does. I think 3-4 is probably my overall prediction, but I think the more important part is going to be what they do against St. Louis, because the absolute, the one thing you can't have happen is that you lose 3 out of 4 of those games, or even, God forbid, you get swept in 4, because suddenly your division lead is really evaporated. And so at the least, you take 2 out of the 4 so that you can maintain what you have, and then pick up a win in Houston, and then come back home. And then that's where hopefully back at Wrigley Field facing the Cardinals again a little bit later on, you can start to gain that ground that you're going to need going into the All-Star break. But as I look at this week ahead, largely because, yes, Shota's coming back, but it's tough to guess what you're going to get from him, how many innings he can give you. So yeah, I'm feeling 3-4 as well.
We'll make it unanimous. Same for me as well. And yeah, something always weird happens in St. Louis. So I guarantee one of those games will just be weird, and they lose that one. As we close out this week's podcast, we will wrap it up the way we do every single week, where we profile a Cubs player from the past. This week we will profile Luis Valbuena. Jared, you are on the clock to provide us with a pick for next week's show. I will put the list of taken Cubs in the chat.
Okay.
So these are the players we have already profiled. So
all right. I've got an easy one because I was just reading about this guy earlier this week. You have Bill Buckner, who is known for the 1986 World Series, but the guy had quite a Cubs career as well. So I'd love to hear some Bill Buckner talk in the next.
This guy right here.
Yes, exactly. So I just finished reading Tyler Kepner's book, The Grandest Stage, about the history of the World Series, and so quite a great book. But quite a bit about Bill Buckner in there. So let's
have made Pat's day.
we may have to have an hour-long episode just on Bill Buckner and his significance to Major League Baseball,
I love it.
To the history of baseball. Bill Buckner is my all-time favorite player. Our dog is named Billy Buckner. It's not Bill Buckner because it's a female. So it was going to be Bill Buckner, but we got a female dog, so we had to call it Billy Buckner. And Yeah, I will tell you stories about how we won the batting championship while I listened at my grandmother's house on my transistor radio as a child. And
Love it.
there was a season when I don't know if you remember the 1980 doubles race when Buckner won the heralded doubles title for the National League. That was a big deal. Yeah,
The guy had
there's
quite a career. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. He was one of the greatest players of all time. I think should be in the Hall of Fame. Certainly on my Cubs Mount Rushmore, ahead of Sammy Sosa even. But that's for next week.
And we will, we will dive deep into Bill Buckner next week. We will talk about Luis Valbuena this week. Jared, before we do, I wanted to give you a chance to get in all your plugs and remind all of our listeners how they can find your work on the internet.
Yeah, they can check out all my written stuff at allchgo.com, where I cover both the Cubs and the White Sox there, but then also I have my own newsletter Substack called The Dugout, and so if you go to Substack and just search Jared Wyllys or The Dugout, you should find me pretty easily there also. So both places.
All right, Jeremy. Luis Valbuena, born in 1985 in Venezuela. When we got people being born in 1985, it does after the 84 Cubs season. It tells you something. Came up with the Mariners organization, debuted in September of 2008. After that season, he was traded to Cleveland in a deal for Franklin Gutierrez and some other players. It was a three-way deal with the Mets, big deal. He gets to Cleveland, and in June of 2009, hits his first major league home run off of none other than Bartolo Colon, who's maybe still pitching, I think. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Big sexy.
Yeah. Played 103 games that year, had a 714 OPS. Not a bad start. He was a part-time player in 2010 and 2011, struggled a little bit, got sent back down to the minors in 2011. After the 2011 season, that November, he was released by Cleveland, picked up by the Toronto Blue Jays, your team, from work. But luckily, he was released weeks later and claimed by the Cubs on April 7th, 2012, and history changed forever. I like to think that Luis Valbuena is solely responsible or single-handedly responsible for the Cubs winning the World Series. And I'll explain why. So he comes to the Cubs in 2012, gets called up for the first time on Flag Day, June 14th, 2012, and that's when the world changed forever. Valbuena played mostly third base. It's a little bit of second base and outfield for the Cubs, mostly third base. In 2013 and 14, he had his breakout seasons, especially 2014. He had a 776 OPS. He kept getting better. He had 2.5 WAR that year. And in those 800, in those 2 years, over 800 at bats, he had 28 home runs, 48 doubles, and perfected the one of the most famous bat flips of all time, as you may recall. He was known for his gregarious nature and his enthusiasm and his amazing bat flips, some of the more significant ones, at least in that era. And he was kind of a spark plug for the Cubs in 2013 and 2014. And I think most Cubs fans have fond memories of him having some big hits, bases loaded walks, grand slams, whatever it took. Luis was there. And, if the Cubs could get a Luis Valbuena type to end the season, to help play some third base and give Shaw a rest, that'd be amazing, right? In 2015, Valbuena made the ultimate sacrifice for the Cubs. He agreed to be traded to the Houston Astros for Dexter Fowler so that the Cubs could win the World Series the following year. It was one of the most magnanimous acts of selflessness I've ever seen from a Major League Baseball player. It allowed the Cubs to win the World Series, but it also allowed the Houston Astros to go to the playoffs. And, we were so focused on the Cubs in 15 and 16 that we kind of weren't paying attention to the American League playoffs until the World Series. He played very well for Houston in those years. He had 2.5 WAR, 2.4 WAR, and this is not as a full-time player, but as a significant utility / decent player. 816 OPS in 2016, the World Series year. Of course, we were busy doing other things. In those 2 years, he had 28 homers and 35 doubles and 725 at-bats.
In that 2015 season, he had a career-high 25 home runs.
Yeah, right. And, we were missing a lot of that. But no, he did quite well. And then after the 2 years, after the 2016 Cubs World Series, his contract with the Astros ended. He signed a 2-year deal with the Astros, paying him $14.5 million. And fortunately, he struggled at the plate those 2 years that he was there.
With the Angels.
With the Angels, yeah. I mean, he was farther away from Wrigley Field. It was just, just got more and more, removed from his glory days with the Cubs. And he struggled significantly. He was released at the end of the season, and he was playing winter ball in Venezuela to try to stay in shape, because I think he was going to try to hook up with another team the next year. And that's when, sadly, on December 6th of 2018, I remember this day very well, at the age of 33, he was killed in a, I won't call it a car accident, but it was an auto-related incident with Jose Castillo, who was also a major league player. Coming home from a winter league game in Venezuela, they were ambushed by bandits on the highway and killed, and they had all their belongings taken from them. It was senseless, tragic situation, and really sad. I mean, here's Luis Valbuena, who in his major league career made almost $29 million, and he gets murdered for his wallet and a couple pieces of jewelry or whatever. It's just awful. And for a guy who had such an infectious, positive impact on the teams he played for, whether it was the Cubs or whether it was the Astros, it was a really sad and tragic end for him. Jaws lists him as the 238th greatest third baseman of all time.
And we can't understate how important it is to have Dexter Fowler on the 2015 team in 2016. Yeah. You don't win the World Series, but remember how Dexter goes, we go. That was the
right. Yeah, he goes, we go. I have here, by the way, one of my prized possessions is this Cubs jersey right here. See this? What makes it a prized possession is not the Cubs, the C on the front, but it is my Luis Valbuena autographed Cubs jersey.
There you go.
I still have the tags on it too. It's one of my prized possessions. He autographed by Valbuena during his Cubs career, I think back in 2014, and I was a huge fan. I really liked him as a player. He was fun to have around. Yeah, he was fun to have around. He's a good guy. He's one of those guys who you kind of wished maybe the Cubs could have gotten back in 2016 down the stretch run, just to have as a guy off the bench kind of thing, So, but yeah, and look, I never, when he did well with Houston, I never wished him ill. I was happy he was doing well. It was a trade that worked out for both teams. It was great that he continued to succeed. I wouldn't have wanted anything else. It wasn't his fault that he had to go to Houston. And then when he signed that contract with the Angels, I was happy about that. But yeah, the tragic ending at the age of 33. I mean, what a sad end to, what was really kind of a remarkable life. He was raised by a single mom in Venezuela. They were dirt poor. He had some uncles who, ran a baseball camp, and basically he was able to kind of come out of, unlikely circumstances to become a Major League Baseball player, making more money in his career than, most of us collectively will ever make. So, it was a rags to riches story and a senseless ending to it. But Luis Valbuena will for always be remembered to me as one of those Cubs who you don't have a negative thought of.
No, absolutely not. And fun to remember the good times of Luis Valbuena. And if you were listening to the audio version of this podcast and we're like, oh, we can't see that, Pat. Well, all you got to do is go to the YouTube channel. Make sure you go to YouTube, search for Wrigleyville Nation Podcast. There you can see Pat holding up that Luis Valbuena autographed jersey. That's where you see it. Or if you're listening in Spotify, if Spotify's your podcatcher of choice, the video version is also available to you right there. You can see that beautiful Luis Valbuena autographed jersey Pat held up as well. And with that, we are going to call it a podcast this week. Make sure that next week we're going to talk about Bill Buckner, Pat. So I'm
I have
sure
over
you're
100
already
Bill Buckner baseball cards. If you'd like me to go year by year and brand by brand, we can.
So yeah, look forward to the special bonus episode when we cover that next week. So no, definitely make sure you're following us on all of the social media platforms at Wrigleyville Nat. And make sure that you tell your Cub fan friends about the podcast. We rely on word of mouth to continue to spread the word. Cubs fans know other Cubs fans, so make sure you tell them how to subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, the best place to do that is over at our Patreon, patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation, where we've been able to keep this show ad-free for many years because our patrons continue to help us keep the lights on. Every single penny goes right back into this show. So thank you to all of our patrons. And if you're thinking about helping us out, that's one way to do it. Another way is to shop in our merch store. If you go to WrigleyvilleNation.com, click the store. Or if you go to any of our social media pages in the link tree right there, there's a link to our store. We have mugs, shirts, hats, phone cases, anything you can think of. They're all there. We've got all kinds of merchandise. Again, all that money comes back to us. We put it right back into the show. Helps us pay for domain names, hosting, mic cables, etc., etc. So please, if you want to support the show, those are the best ways to do it. And we appreciate every single person who continues to spread the word for this podcast and rate reviews and subscribes and do all that stuff. Helps us immensely. We see all the new people joining along the way, and we appreciate every single one of you. And with that, we're going to wrap it up and call it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening. And we'll talk to you again next time.